Hey there, and welcome to Grandma Has ADHD. I am your host, Justin, and with me, as always, I'm just kidding. I'm taking over today to do the introduction, but Jami is really your host, and I am here as a co-host and moral support. But welcome to our podcast of Grandma Has ADHD. So with that said, let me bring Jami on.
Hi, and welcome to the latest edition of Grandma Has ADHD. I am so excited to welcome the original grandma, who is not my grandma. She's my children's grandma, right? And Justin, you're going to pipe in on this one today. So, and my brother from another mother,
Okay, that
literally.
one actually did work. That
Huh?
one, you nailed that one.
You're my brother from another mother. So, if you listened to the initial episode, which I hope that you did, you'll know more about this. But I am going to assume that you didn't listen. If you're like me with your ADHD, you just kind of ping from one thing to the next. But I discovered my own ADHD about 7 years ago. And interestingly enough, I remember my ex husband saying to me, "You have ADHD." And I was like, "No, I don't. My brother, Justin, he has ADHD. He's the kid bouncing off of walls. I'm not hyper. I don't have ADHD." And when my oldest child was diagnosed, I looked at the psychiatrist and I said, "I'm answering more yeses for myself than my child. Do I also have it?" And he said, "You absolutely do." So I spent 7 years learning all about my ADHD, and I did know that it was heritable. And I knew that Justin and my father also had it. So I just assumed, okay, I got it from my dad.
You know what?
And
I'm glad. I just want to pipe in. How you said it's just your father. We can keep it that way if you
I
want.
said Justin and my father.
I thought you said just my father.
Okay. So I'm learning all about ADHD. And if you have ADHD or you're learning that you have ADHD and you've ever gotten super interested in something, like you think of the little kid who's into dinosaurs and they'll learn every single dinosaur and everything that they can do. Well, that has been my ADHD journey. I have just really, I'm not going to say enmeshed, but ADHD became the thing that I was the most fascinated by. So really learning about it, and it didn't even occur to me until like December or January that my own mom sitting next to me, Vicki, the original grandma, she had ADHD because when I was a little kid, I couldn't sit still and read a book. And then when my child started reading at 3, I was like, "Well, you can't have ADHD because you love to read and you can sit and read a book." And my mom was very introverted and we're very different personalities. And my mom would sit and read for hours. So but then now that I work with seniors and I've been going in and out of seniors' homes, especially seeing the clutter that, as I've shared, I used to say was hoarding disorder. I mean, obviously, all of these people who have all of these piles, it's hoarding disorder. And actually, it wasn't hoarding disorder. It was actually ADHD. And I went home in January and I looked at my mom's apartment and I'm looking around and I'm like, this really isn't hoarding disorder. And I had tried to organize my mom for years. And I'm like, this is my mom's creativity exploding all over her place. So she's always doing craft projects and she would do one craft project and the next craft project. So anyway, as typical ADHD, I decided that I wanted to create something out of this. And Grandma Has ADHD came to my attention and, typical ADHD. So mom, hi.
Hi.
So it's fun too, because, my mom is a boomer.
Yeah.
Not very good with technology. Now, some boomers are, but with a typical ADHD, if it's not something that interests you, you can't do it. We tried to do a recording with my mom remote a couple weeks ago. Didn't work. So she is visiting from Florida. And since we're together, I figured she couldn't mess up the technology.
Look
Am
at
I
you
right?
look at you being ageist to the boomers.
Well, I am not. I'm going to say this right now. I am not an ageist because my audience are boomers and I love boomers. So it's you millennials that have problems with boomers, not this Gen Xer who was raised by one.
Now you're being ageist to the millennials.
Yes, I am.
Right.
So, Mom, tell me about your ADHD discovery.
My ADHD discovery came from my daughter who was staying in my apartment. And someone came back to me and said they had seen an earlier podcast and said, "I saw your picture. I saw your house." And I said, "What?" And she said, "There were pictures of you." And that's how I knew it was your house. So when Jami was little, she couldn't keep any of the moving parts still. Every moving part was going at all times. And I took her to the doctor and I said, "Is she antikinetic?" And he said, "No, she has a nervous mother." And I told her today, I said, "I actually discovered that you were dyskinetic, that you were the one that was ADHD. They didn't call it that." And he said, "I was a nervous mother." So what I've learned from it is that all these years that we've been locking horns, you're suddenly going, "Mom, you're not so bad. You just have ADHD." And that's been a plus because we have really locked horns a lot and we're just two different people. And our ADHD shows itself in different ways. So that in itself was worth everything, to have my daughter and I be able to talk and get along. So that's how I discovered it. Was my daughter, who has ADHD, decided that I had it, and all my friends said, "No, you don't." And I said, "Well, no, I don't have the H part, but I have everything else."
So you said I discovered it, but you did go through years of therapy and have struggled with anxiety and depression, as very common with people with ADHD.
Mhm.
But I am not a doctor and I cannot diagnose you. But I did send you some information and you've been reading. And based on what I have shared with you, what would you say?
I would say I have ADHD
Right.
minus the H.
Right. Well, and I think that's the thing. A lot of people say, "No, I don't have ADHD. I have ADD." Well, they don't distinguish the difference anymore. What they now say is that the hyperactivity can show up in our bodies. So you see the little boy like Justin who was hyper and needed to be on Ritalin. But our minds, people who are hyperactive in our brains are just always going. And so you don't necessarily see it. And it turns out that my mom loves to read. And so what people with ADHD, there's this misconception that we cannot focus, but what's actually true is that we can focus if something interests us. So you love reading, love mystery novels, and have my entire life, and actually did even as a little girl yourself. So you could sit still and read because that's what you like to do, right?
Right.
Okay. So do you have a child or a grandchild with ADHD?
I have one of each.
There you go. Yeah, that's usually a question. And once you realized that you had ADHD, which is actually a fairly recent discovery for you, how did you feel about it? What did you feel? Was it relief? Was it regret? Was it both?
It was both. It was both because I was treated. My parents divorced when I was 14 and I was a wreck. And my mother took me to a therapist who put me on tranquilizers at 14.
And that was back in what year? That would have been like 61, just to give everyone a perspective.
Back in 61.
So back in 1961, people weren't divorcing. So there was a stigma about your parents divorcing, and you were having some issues dealing with it, but also probably some other issues that were not diagnosed.
Right.
Right. And I remember speaking with my uncle, who is my mom's brother, and my grandparents used to say, "Vicki never finishes anything," which was one of my frustrations with my mom. In fact, I remember, and I want to share this, that currently there is no testing for seniors with ADHD. And what they are now doing is they are looking at past behavior, like back to your 40s. And that is really how they're distinguishing what's age-related memory loss versus what's attributable to ADHD. But I can remember I was always frustrated with my mom because she could never finish anything. She would start all these projects and then she wouldn't finish it. And then I'd say, "Mom, when are you going to do this? And when are you going to do this? And when are you going to finish this?" And my mom was always saying, "I'm going to get around to it. I'm going to get around to it. I'm going to get around to it." And I heard somebody talking about literally a round to it, like just a circle piece of paper that had the word TUIT. And I remember giving you a to it and saying, "Here, Mom, here's your round to it." Do you remember that? So it has been an ongoing sense of frustration for me as a child with a parent with ADHD. Like, why can't she, like, for instance, my mom is super smart. Like, she uses words that I don't know. She reads all the time. She can have great conversation, but she didn't finish college. And I remember she was working for a company that she absolutely hated. She called it the Golden Handcuffs, and they offered tuition reimbursement. And I would say, "Mom, go to school. You got the money. You don't have kids at home anymore. Go to school." And she would say, I can't go. Remember, what did you say?
I can't concentrate. I'm real good early in the morning. Anytime after 5, I just start collapsing for the night.
Which isn't just age.
No, it's been that way my whole life. I mean, I went to bed at 8:00. My roommates would study all night. They'd cram for exams. And I said, if I don't know it by now, I'm not going to learn it by cramming. And I'd go to bed at 8 or 8:30.
I feel this. Like I feel this so much because that was why it took me 8 years to get my undergrad. Because I like not trying to whatever. I'm intelligent and I learn what I want to learn. But getting me to get up and go to class. Plus, I've always been like a night owl, so I wouldn't go to bed at 8:30. I'd go to bed more like 2. I know I feel that I was terrible in school, and typically what I would do is I would go through, miss a ton of classes, get to the very end, and basically convince my professor to let me do something or make up some excuse as to why to make sure I got a passing grade. It's typically what I would do every semester.
Yeah. I wasn't smart enough to do that. I mean, I couldn't talk to my professors. I was terrified. And I think that's part of my ADHD too, I had a father who was really tough on me. And as a result, I have my marriages have been failures and I just stay away from men. I mean, I'm friends, but that's it. Because that was definitely something that was an issue with me and a male who was in authority.
Yeah, I think, and a side conversation to that, a lot of people who do have ADHD are more likely to be divorced. It can be from trauma, like my mom's, but it can also be a lot of times a spouse of someone with ADHD doesn't feel like they're listening, they're remembering things. So there is a higher incidence of divorce rate, like our father, we debate how many times he's been married. We're going to pause for a commercial and then we're going to give the answer to that. So if you want to hear how many times our father has been married, you're going to stick around and hear what our sponsors have to say, and then we are going to come back. If you are listening to this podcast, there's a good chance you or a loved one is feeling overwhelmed by the challenges of ADHD or disorganization. Since those of us with ADHD tend to struggle with where to begin big projects like moving or home organizing, the Silver Linings Transitions team can guide you through the process, breaking tasks down into manageable steps or handling every detail. There's a reason our team carries magic wands when we work with our clients. We can pack and move your entire home and you won't have to miss a day of work or touch a single box. We also provide home organizing and storage sortouts with an understanding of ADHD. If you have a home to sell, we can provide you free or discounted services when we refer you to one of our realtor partners through our realtor referral program. Visit our website at www.silverliningstransitions.com or call us at 760-522-1624 to learn more about how we can help you make your move or home organizational project magical.
Okay, and we're back. And so we're going to settle something once and for all because your mom,
the original first wife, right?
Yeah, wife number one.
Sure.
We agree that she is wife number one?
We all agree that she's number one. Okay, here's the question. Are we counting my mom twice is the first question for two separate ones. Well, that's the first question. I'm not asking you, Jami. Don't shake your head no. Vicki, are we counting her twice?
I usually count her twice. It sounds worse.
Okay. I mean, Jason and I we always like to make the joke that we have the same parents, but are from different marriages. So that means it's your mom, my mom again. Then there's Cynthia. Mm-hmm. Okay. Then
Barbara.
Mm-hmm. She was the worst. Then
I think your mother was the worst.
But Barbara just sucked. And I'm happy to say this on a podcast where she may hear it one day because she's just a terrible human being. Then here's where we debate. Okay, we debate on Deborah, okay? Because he was with her for 10 years. They weren't technically married, but under common law, Florida law, they were common law married. So do we count that?
Yeah, but given that our father...
No, don't sway her. Don't sway.
Mom.
I didn't realize they were together that long. I thought it was 2 or 3 years.
But wouldn't you say this about his father, that he doesn't have a problem walking down the aisle, right?
Well, he doesn't go to the aisle. He usually goes to the courthouse, but yeah.
Yes. So if he really wanted to marry her, don't you think he would have legally done it?
Yeah. Well,
yes. She said yes.
But under Florida, okay, you know what? If you're listening to this episode, drop it in the comments, or you can shoot us a message on whatever the website is we're doing. What's the website we're doing for this?
grandmahasADHD.com.
There you go. There may be a way to do it, and you can vote on this. But here's the other question. He didn't technically walk down the aisle, but 10 years under Florida law constitutes common law marriage. And had something happened to him, she would have probably still been entitled to half his possessions, at least because of that. I mean, she did get the house.
We're not going to speak about our dad right now. Like that's a
Okay.
whole
She doesn't want
episode.
to lose this argument. So hold on. So are we counting her or no, Vicki?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, 6. Then now we have Roxana. So that's 7. Lucky
I say
number 7.
5. I say 5.
Anyways,
So
moving on. We
back
settled this
to-
right now. She was
yeah.
the third party, but you just don't like what she said, so now it's still going to be 5. That's
Okay.
fine.
So that was the answer to the question. You can chat with us. But mom, so back to the question. When you realized that you had ADHD, and it
Mhm.
wasn't just, I want to say this, I am very clear. I am not a doctor. I just have ADHD. I have learned a lot about it. I have taken a couple of courses with level 1, almost level 2, with the Institute for Challenging Disorganization. I've been a senior move manager with the National Association of Senior Move Managers for 10 years. I have a child with ADHD. I have a brother with ADHD. I have a father with ADHD. I have ADHD. So I understand it. And now I'm actually going to become a certified ADHD coach. So, mom, I suggested that I thought that you had it and sent you some podcasts to read. So we're going on based on everything that you've understood. Yes. Okay. So how do you feel?
Well, as I said, I'm relieved, and I have fibromyalgia, which is also part of ADHD. And all these years, I've been saying I have fibromyalgia. Well, now this puts a different slant on it, and I don't know which side it comes from, or both, or maybe just makes it worse. But I don't have a favorite trait. I'm just relieved in my own head when I falter or stumble over something,
Like a word.
yeah, or the floor, whatever. I just kind of can say in my own mind, it's okay, you're all right. I mean, it's nobody has to know, or you can tell them if you want to. And I'm not ashamed of telling people at this point, because I do believe I have it. And even though my friends will argue with me, I still think I have it, and have had it a long, 77 years. So that's it. It's kind of validates me.
It's interesting to have this visit. It's the first time that we've really been together since we both made the discovery. And it was funny. I was in the kitchen making breakfast yesterday, and I left all the cabinets open. And my mom says, I leave the cabinets open. I'm like, that's an ADHD thing. Move into the next thing, right? And then today we were at an event, and we were going to this event, and my mom is coming to the 9th anniversary of my business, and I'm going to introduce her to everybody. And we pull out of the driveway, and I said something to my mom, and she clearly doesn't hear me. And I'm like, Mom, did you remember your hearing aids? And she hadn't. So we went back and got them. And then we leave the event, and I get a phone call. Jami, we think you left your computer at the event. So, and you know where I used to get frustrated with my mom? I'm like, okay, now I get it. Like now we have a common language, which is so crazy. I do want to take a pause when we're recording, because we found in some of the reading the link between ADHD and fibromyalgia, and because she mentioned it, and because we are going to see seniors that have it, I want to go ahead and go get some information so that I can cite the source before we're just like blurting things out. So you may or may not hear it as a pause, but I'm going to take a quick stop, do a little research, and come back and share that.
Well, you can go, and I'm going to keep talking. How's that?
You know why I got up?
Yeah, we don't even know. So I have to say this to you. What you just said a second ago with talking about your ADHD and not being afraid to say it, I think that when you look at the baby boomer generation, you guys were taught basically that, because, for you to get a diagnosis of ADHD, it typically has to come by psychiatrist, psychologist, some type of neuro doctor. And things like that, when y'all were young, were very taboo. If you needed a psychiatrist or a shrink, it was very much frowned upon. And so there was something seriously wrong with you if you needed to talk to a psychiatrist. So the fact that you're at a point where you can be like, hey, this is what I have, and you're comfortable talking about it, I think that's great, because then if you look at the different generations, Gen X got a little bit better about it, but not so much. Millennials got much better about it. And now with Gen Z, if you don't see a psychiatrist or a therapist, then there's something wrong with you probably. So it's really kind of come that full way into something that there's no, especially with the younger generations, there's no stigma attached to it whatsoever like it used to be. I remember talking about things with my mother real quick. Is my grandmother, who is 91 and does not have ADHD, but she was talking to me about my mother when she was a teenager, and apparently when she was 14 or so years old, she ran away. And she wrote this whole long letter and said that I'm not going to come back until you see a psychiatrist, indicating that there's something seriously wrong with my grandfather. And she wrote back and said, no, you're the one that needs a psychiatrist. And that was kind of a way of insulting each other back then. If she was 14, that would have been like 19. It's probably 67, 68, something like that. So just wanted to kind of put that out there because we've come such a long way from what happened when they were kids and the way their parents treated them to where we are now.
Well, we have a whole language now, really, around all sorts of things. And it's interesting because you're right. I mean, I almost feel like kids feel left out if they don't have something, which I almost hate to say. But I'm also glad that we are in an inclusive environment where I will stand up and announce when I give a talk, you need to turn your phones off. I did a talk yesterday to a group of seniors called Grandma Has ADHD. And a lot of them had never heard of it, right? And I just explained that if you get up or you are talking in the middle of my presentation or your phone goes off, I will lose my focus. It's going to happen. And you're either going to get a better presentation out of me or we're going to talk about the squirrels. But, and I do very openly say that it is my superpower because I have learned to create scaffolding around my ADHD. And just like today, we were driving back and I forgot to do something. I'm on a committee and I'm supposed to do something. And the woman calls me and she says, I got your back. I know you were supposed to call me and you didn't. So I promptly, as I'm driving, set an alarm, make sure and so like now I know I'm not going to remember. And what is it that I can put in place to remember? But I do want to tell you that I Googled fibromyalgia and ADHD. There's a lot of articles about it. The first article came out in Attitude Magazine, March 31st of 2022, says fibromyalgia patients should be screened for ADHD, study says. And basically, there's a lot of comorbidity between ADHD and fibromyalgia. The study was published in the November Journal of Pain Medicine. This is, if you are seeing me on the screen, my mom's phone keeps going off. Do you know how to turn it on to silent, Mom?
Yeah.
I think she does.
Well, real quick, while you're talking about that, I experienced the same issue. So obviously, you know what I do, and I do a lot of live streams on YouTube as well as on TikTok. And I will be in the middle of talking about something, and I will. And the TikTok is the worst about it because you have constant streaming. Like the lives that I've been doing the last few days have been like 2,800 people, between 1,400 and 2,800 people in these lives, and the comments are constantly scrolling, and I get distracted by them. So sometimes I'll be like, "Look, I'm not trying to ignore y'all. I'm going to finish this statement and I'm not going to look at the screen." And I turn my head because I have ADD and I will be so far off track. I'll never get anywhere, but they do a pretty good job of keeping me on track. So you sometimes have to. And most people, I've never had anybody give any pushback. Most people completely understand.
Yeah, we need accommodations. I mean, and I'm really glad too that my team knows. And by the way, I manage someone with ADHD and it's funny because I get really frustrated but I'm like, we have to have tools in place because she's amazing. I love her. She's creative. People love her. She's got a great personality. And I definitely notice that there are things that don't happen. And it is sometimes like, working with myself. But I just want to finish this little part of this article because again, our audience are seniors, but the article goes on to end that nearly half of the patients, 44.7%, tested positive for ADHD. So of the fibromyalgia patients they looked at, almost half had ADHD. So anyway, there's a link. And as we are aging, there are going to be things that are exaggerated by having ADHD. And I think it's helpful for people to understand. So Mom, we were talking about this in the car. You said you had some relief. And I asked you, what, if anything, have you put in place for yourself now that you are aware?
This is a hard one to answer since I've only been dealing with this for 2 weeks.
It's more than 2 weeks.
Is
Mom.
it? Oh, okay. Well, that's ADHD.
Well, we're in May, but somehow December, January for sure, because that's when I visited, we've jumped to 2 weeks.
Hey,
so in
Vicki,
the 2 weeks.
Vicki, when all else fails, always blame your ADHD. Always.
That's what I said, ADHD. And it's great because I can say it to her and pretty much shuts her up.
See how convenient that is? It's a good trick.
But okay, so Mom, how about this? Now that you know about it, tell me some other like instances of, oh, this was ADHD in my life looking back.
Pretty much everything that has happened to me, I have always, as I said, attributed it to fibromyalgia. So I can't really separate for you what was which one, because it was always fibromyalgia.
Well, you
And
didn't have fibromyalgia when you were young.
no, but since I've been, well, no, but I didn't have ADHD like I do now.
So estrogen affects ADHD. They've definitely determined that the drop in estrogen that happens for women, that when we are pregnant, actually, we do really, really well. That estrogen helps our ADHD. So if you listen to Dr. Kathleen Nadeau's episode, which is going to come a little bit later, what she says is that there are 2 times in a woman's life where she's likely to have a diagnosis. One is when she is perimenopause, because again, our estrogen is changing, and the other is when her child is diagnosed. So that, and then aging compounds. We have memory loss and cognitive impairment is typical and normal for normal healthy aging, and then add a little ADHD to that mix. So okay, any other ADHD things you want to talk about? Because this is your opportunity.
My 15 minutes of fame.
This is your 15 minutes of fame.
Yeah. I can't, I'm just very grateful that you picked up on it, because I would have punished myself or beaten myself up over the fibromyalgia, because not everybody has it and more people do have ADHD. But there's a lot of pain involved in fibromyalgia. And I don't know about the ADHD, whether there's the pain there, but there's a lot of pain involved with fibromyalgia. But as long as my mind doesn't go, as long as I can still remember what I was going to say, even if it's 15 minutes later, I'm happy.
And I want to point out something too, Justin. One of the traits of ADHD is emotional dysregulation. And social anxiety is the biggest comorbidity, if that's the right word, that people with ADHD have. And I remember my mom was always avoiding situations, and it always used to frustrate me that even we had cousins that were, my mom lives in Florida, and she never wanted to go and be around other people. And now, where I used to get mad at my mom, now I'm like, okay, well, that's social anxiety. And it's really real for a lot of people with ADHD. And I would say, to air a little dirty laundry, my mom was a single mom by 24. So she had me at 23. So I'm a year old. She's 24. So she's a young single mom. And I remember being 4 years old and my mom crying to me, which is a heavy burden to put on a young child. And I know other mothers who have ADHD who are putting too much emotionally on their children. And not that it makes it better, because it doesn't, but I have a new understanding of it. And I think one of the quotes that I love, Maya Angelou and then Oprah Winfrey, when you know better, you do better. So now you have the tools, and now you know better. So I think but I think learning, this is not that it gives you an excuse, like your ADHD excuse, Justin, but now and then how can we build, I see the smile, how can we build the scaffolding around it so that, yes, it is occurring, and yes, this is the reason that it's occurred, but how do we make it better? Anybody have any?
No. I think that to make it better, though, it's very individualized, right? So there's not like you can make like say, because what's going to work for me might not work for you. What works for you might not work for Vicki, and vice versa. And what works for all of us might not work for our father, who's extremely ADHD. It's like all 3 of us on combined plus cocaine. So it's just because that's what it is doesn't mean that it's going to work. So I think what you really have to do is you have to determine, okay, well, what kind of stopgaps can you put into place? What will work? Like, so for you, they utilize your smart devices when you can. If you're somebody who's fairly decent with technology, using your smart devices to help kind of set reminders, you could do lists. Post-it notes can be a good thing if you're not so much with that. If you have an Alexa's amazing to remind you everything. Put things in place to help you remember what you need to remember. Reminders. It's something that I really struggle with. The funny thing is, I know that with everything that we have going on with me now, helping you with this, plus all the other stuff I've got going on, I need to do a calendar, but I'm so ADD that I can't even get to the calendar to do the calendar. So it's just a matter of figuring out what's going to work best for you and then committing to it.
Right. And I will say this too, with some seniors are really tech savvy, and some seniors are not tech savvy. But I would encourage you, if you think having a smartwatch or having a phone is going to help you, there are all sorts of seniors and technology programs that are available. And I think that's going to be something that will include the show notes on this show, but also have on the Grandma Has ADHD website, because I know I'm not leaving my hard-boiled eggs on the stove anymore. which I've done numerous times because now I put a timer on my phone. So definitely, not only do we want to share ADHD stories, but we also want to create support around absolute support and tips for people who do have ADHD.
I have an idea as we move forward with this, and I shouldn't say this out loud because I know you're going to task me with it. But basically, what we could try to do is as we come up with ideas and little devices that can help, perhaps what we can do is create an Amazon storefront that we can link so people can go there and be like, hey, if we talk about like an Amazon Alexa, or we talk about certain things that are out there that can help, remember, we can go there, things that are more senior friendly to kind of help people do it.
Don't you think I already thought of that?
No.
Well, you don't know me very well then. But okay, so Mom, so what's next for you?
I'm thinking about a watch that I can talk into.
Yeah, I
You
might
should
need
get
to.
her- Mother's Day's coming up. I think an Apple Watch would be a nice present. What do you
Yeah.
think,
Yeah.
Vicki? I
I
think it'd be
think
a very nice present.
I think I already got her gift, but
Hey, there's
we'll
still
have
3 days left. Go to the Apple store. You're in
okay.
California. There's plenty of those, and I think it'd be a very nice gift for her.
Well, thank you, Justin.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Justin.
I'm going to commit you to it.
Okay. So, all right. I appreciate having you here today, Mom. And I hope that this opens the door to conversations. If you are a senior with ADHD, or you are a middle-aged mom like me and you suspect your parent has ADHD, going back and like revisiting history in a way that really kind of, oh, this is what makes sense. Because as I like to end my show, we want to make the rest of your life the best of your life. The opinions expressed on Grandma Has ADHD podcast are those of our guests and hosts and are intended for informational and entertainment purposes only. This podcast does not provide medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. The content discussed in this episode is not a substitute for professional medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. Always seek the advice of your physician, mental health professional, or other qualified health provider with any questions you may have regarding a medical condition or mental health concern. Never disregard professional medical advice or delay in seeking it because of something you have heard on this podcast. If you think you may have a medical emergency, call your doctor or emergency services immediately. The hosts, guests, and producers of Grandma Has ADHD do not assume any liability for the content of this podcast. Listen at your own discretion.